Ready to go. Have a good session.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is the second half of the session on foundations. And our first talk will be non-interactive batch arguments for NP from standard assumptions by Akarai Chowdhury, Abhishek Jain, and Zhenzhong Jin. And Zhenzhong will give the talk.
Thanks for the introduction. This talk is about non-interactive batch arguments for NP from standard assumptions. I'm Zhenzhong Jin from Johns Hopkins University. This work is joined with Akarai Chowdhury and Abhishek Jain. The non-interactive batch argument is a protocol between a prover and a verifier in the CRS model. The prover tries to convince the verifier that a batch of k instances x1 to xk are all in the some NP language L by sending a single round of message pi. And finally, the verifier needs to publicly verify this proof pi and decides to accept or reject the proof. To help the prover compute this single round of message, we also allow it to take omega 1 to omega k as the witness for this x1 to xk. And we further request that the length of this proof pi is significantly less than the total length of the witnesses. For the soundness, we request that for any statement that all of x1 to xk are in the language L doesn't hold, we request that for any efficient adversary, its proof should be rejected. Previously, this batch verification is extensively studied for many crypto primitives, such as digital signatures or interactive proofs. So the batch argument is a very important problem. Previously, by the work of Reingold and Rosenblum et al., they built batch verification for a subclass of NP, which is the UP class. In their work, they also consider the interactive setting. And the batch verification can be viewed as a special case for the NP class. So one can also hope to use succinct non-interactive argument for NP to build batch verification. However, up to now, we only know how to build snarks for NP from non-falsifiable assumptions or in the random oracle model. Recently, by the work of Braksky et al., they built non-interactive batch arguments in the standard from standard assumption, but their protocol is only private verifiable, where the verifier needs to use some private state to verify the proof. And more recently, by the work of Kalai et al., they built non-interactive batch argument in the public verifiable setting, but their assumption is a new assumption from bilinear maps. So in this work, we try to understand, can we build non-interactive batch arguments for NP from standard assumptions? And in this work, we answer this question positively. We show how to build non-interactive batch arguments for NP from standard assumptions, from the assumptions in the quadratic residuosity and the learning with error or sub-exponential DDH assumption, where the proof size grows only square root in the number of instances k. To obtain our result, our method is to follow the Fenn-Shamir framework. The Fenn-Shamir transformation is a method to collapse a public calling interactive protocol to a non-interactive protocol by replacing all the verifier's message with the hash of the transcript so far. And recently, there is an exciting line of work trying to instantiate the Fenn-Shamir transformation from standard assumptions. And the idea is to build a special hash function, which is called correlation intractable hash. However, by this method, we only know how to collapse interactive proofs, where the soundness hold even for unbounded adversary. So to deal with this issue, our method is to start with some dual mode interactive batch argument. Such an interactive protocol is in the CRS model, and the CRS has two indistinguishable modes. So in the triplet mode, the CRS is associated with some indices I, and the protocol becomes statistically sound for the IS indices in the triplet mode. It means that for any unbounded adversary, it cannot cheat for any xi that is not in this language. Then we apply the Fenner-Shamir to this interactive protocol by using the correlation intractable hash. And in the soundness proof, we use the property of correlation intractability to prove the soundness. For more details, you can refer to our full talk and our full paper online. And also, in a follow-up of this work, we also build snarks for P from learning with arrow, which is recently accepted to Fox 2021. Thank you.
Thank the speaker for the talk. Any questions from the audience? Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up. Okay, let's thank the speaker again. And our next talk is on targeted lossy functions and applications by Willie Qualch, Brent Waters, and Daniel Wicks. And Willie will give the talk. Welcome.
Hi, can you see the slide and hear me properly?
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. So I'm Willie, and I'm going to talk about targeted lossy functions and applications. So this is joint work with Brent Waters and Daniel Wicks. Okay, so what do we do in this paper? The conceptual starting point is the primitive called lossy trapdoor functions that was introduced by Pikers and Waters in 2008, which turns out to be an extremely powerful primitive in the sense that it has led to many applications. But the thing that we're interested in this context is that this is a rather higher end primitive in the sense that it requires public key assumptions. So what we do in this paper is we define a relaxation of lossy trapdoor functions that we call targeted lossy functions. And we indeed show that this is a lower end primitive in the sense that we build targeted lossy functions from objects related to one-way functions. And last, we show that this primitive is also useful by showing applications of targeted lossy functions, which leads to mainly to new feasibility results in Minicrypt. Oh yeah, so let me first recall what's a lossy trapdoor function. So what was introduced by Pikers and Waters in 2008. So a lossy trapdoor function will define a family of functions. So that will be my my pictures for the domain and the range of the associated functions. And it will be a family of functions indexed by some function key. So there's a way to sample a key, and given a key that defines a function that I can efficiently evaluate from a domain to a range. And there will be a way to generate such a key such that the resulting function will be injective. And furthermore, the key can be also generated along with a trapdoor that allows to revert the application of the function. There will also be an alternative mode of sampling the keys called the lossy mode. And the idea is that applying the function should information theoretically lose some information about the input. So what does that mean? So say you sample some point in your domain at random and apply the function. So you get an output. And now I'm just giving you the output and I'm asking what was the particular X I started from. And that should be information theoretically hard. And if that holds, we say that the function is lossy. And last, a property that ties everything together is that if I'm sampling a key in injective mode or in lossy mode, then you cannot tell the difference. So you can evaluate the function, but you don't know if the function that you are getting is injective or lossy. Okay, so that's a lossy trapdoor function. So what's a targeted lossy function? As I said before, it's a relaxation of lossy trapdoor function. So in what sense is that different? So the first difference will be that we don't require any trapdoor in injective mode. So that will be conceptually the relaxation that makes targeted lossy functions not immediately a public key primitive. And so we only require that in injective mode, it just defines an injective function. But we also relax the requirement, the lossy mode. And the lossy mode will be targeted. So what do I mean by that? The lossy mode will take as input a particular target that I will code X star. And the application of the function should only lose information when starting from X star. So again, if I start from X star, I apply the function, and I give you the output of the function, then it should be information theoretically hard to tell what was the particular X star I started from. And the reason why this is a relaxation is that I only require this essentially over X star. And there's no requirement on the rest of the function, essentially. So in particular, it could be possible that in lossy mode, the function is injective almost everywhere, apart from a few points related to X star. And last, we have to strengthen a tiny bit the indistinguishability requirement between the modes, because the function key in targeted lossy mode respect to X star will depend on X star, and we don't want this to reveal information about X star, essentially. So what we'll require is that the function key should be indistinguishable even given X star. Yeah, so that's our notion of targeted lossy functions. So now what? Well, first, we show that this relaxation actually allows us to get constructions from weaker assumptions. And so we showed that assuming injective pseudorandom generators, then we can build targeted lossy functions. Furthermore, similar to how the original paper introducing lossy trapdoor functions considered execution branches, we can also consider execution branches for targeted lossy functions, and we can also build that from the same assumptions. Next, we show that actually for the applications that we have in mind, we don't necessarily require the full power of injectivity, and a slightly relaxed form of injectivity that is still pretty natural to define suffices for applications. And what that does, not requiring the function in injective mode to be fully injective, actually allows us to get interpretations from one-way functions. So that will be crucial to get the final theorem statement for applications. And as a side observation that I think is pretty cute is that it turns out that there's a conceptual quite strong link between targeted lossy functions and distributed point functions, even though they might look extremely different. Last, as I mentioned in the beginning, we actually show that targeted lossy functions are useful in order to build as a building block. So we get several applications. So the first set of applications is in the realm of leakage resilience, symmetric key primitives that we manage to build from one-way functions. So in particular, we get leakage resilient symmetric key primitives that are slightly better than the state of the art by giving, say, a MAC where the tagging procedure is deterministic. So previous construction from one-way functions required a randomized procedure. And we also give a symmetric key encryption with kind of compact ciphertext size. Another application that we get is the construction of randomness extractor for so-called extractor-dependent sources from one-way functions, where previous constructions use public key assumptions. We also get a symmetric key encryption that is simulation secure against so-called selective opening attacks from one-way functions. So these are all applications from one-way functions. And last, we also show that it's actually also useful for higher end kind of applications by showing a new construction of CCA secure encryption from extremely secure trapdoor functions. So while the end statement is somewhat is quite weaker than what was done at Crypto last year by Hohenberger, Coppola, and Waters, it's still a conceptually new approach to be on, and I think it should be on the CCA secure encryption. Yeah, so that's all I had to say. Feel free to ask me or email me questions, and here's the link for the ePrints version. Thanks.
Thanks, Willie, for the talk. Any questions for the speaker? I have one question for the weakening of the lossy functions. So you weakened both the injective mode and the lossy mode. Is it possible to just weaken one of them?
So like if you want to build the function from just one-way functions, you definitely would need to not have the trapdoor in injective mode. And but then you would be reasonable to consider like the standard version of lossiness. Is just that we don't know how to build that. It would be a natural thing to target for, but we didn't manage to get that.
I see. Okay, if there's no more questions, let's thank the speaker again. And our last talk will be on the T-wise independence of substitution permutation networks by Tianren Liu, Stefano Tersaro, and Vinod Vaikunthanathan. And Tianren will give the talk.
Could you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay. Thanks, Behan, for the introduction. Welcome to my talk, the T-wise independence of substitution permutation network. I'm Tianren Liu, and this is joint work with my co-authors Stefano and Vinod. A central problem in crypto is to construct random looking keyed permutations. Tons of work are targeting this problem. Among them, there's a well-known, well not so well-defined gap between theory and practice. The theory work called this object a pseudorandom permutation, and they focus on security based on well-studied assumptions. The practical works call this object a block cipher. They are okay with theoretical security. The first priority is being super efficient. Of course, everyone wants to bridge the gap and has a proper secure super efficient construction, but it seems very hard. So in the literature, we have proper secure PRP based on many assumptions. Unfortunately, none of them is fast enough to be practical. In practice, people use much more efficient block ciphers such as AES. Then, of course, everyone wants to understand whether AES is secure. From the theory perspective, we want to base AES on hardness assumptions, but we have no clue here. We don't even have a candidate assumption. Many works then try to argue the security of practical block ciphers in some idealized models. But still, these works are not analyzing the actual ciphers. When we got stuck proving security against arbitrary attacks, the next best thing we can hope for is to identify classes of attacks and prove they cannot succeed with good probability. To show this in a picture, the community has already identified many classes of attacks. Previous works show that AES can resist some classes of attacks to some extent. In this paper, we promote the study of T-wise independent. It is a desired property of block ciphers, and it implies resistances to many attacks. When T equals 2, it already implies resistances to linear and differential attacks. Larger T implies resistancy to more attacks. So T-wise independency is a very natural property. For any T inputs, the corresponding T outputs should be close to ID uniform. Here we measured closeness in statistical distance. For feasibility, the key length has to be at least T times the output length to have enough entropy. This requirement can be ensured by the standard assumption of independent round keys, which is assumed by almost every work in the field. From the theory perspective, T-wise independence means security against an unbounded distinguisher who makes at most T queries. And notice that linear and differential attacks relies on correlation within two queries. So in some sense, these attacks can be captured by a distinguisher that makes only two queries. Similarly, order D differential attack can be captured by a distinguisher that makes 2 to the D queries. And therefore, T-wise independence would imply resistances to all these attacks and to any attack that relies on correlation among only T queries. In this paper, we studied the block cipher designs KC, SPN, and the concrete cipher AES. For the rest of my talk, I briefly mention our results. For KC, we show that R round of KC is close to slightly less than R was independent. This is an existential result and is proved by probabilistic method. But our result is quite tight, since we can easily show that R round KC cannot be R plus 2 was independent. I would also like to mention here that in our result, permutation pi's are fixed and are completely known to the adversary, which is different from the result in ideal models. For SPN, when we consider the S box being inverse, which is used by AES, or cube, which is used by mimic. We show 2-round SPN is close to 2S independent, and the 3-round SPN is even closer to 2S independent. We also show that 6-round AES, so the extra AES round, there's no idealization at all. It's also close to 2S independent. So these are our main results. They can be easily amplified because the distance is smaller than a half. So for example, for AES, by increasing the number of rounds, AES will be exponentially close to 2S independent. So that's all of my talk today. Thank you for listening. You're welcome to watch the full version or read our paper. You can also find me in the social room after the session if you want to discuss offline.
Thanks, Tianren, for the talk. Any questions from the audience? Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Okay, let's thank all the speakers again for the wonderful talks and the session.